Welcome to As Long as the River Flows, a Keepers of the Water podcast. Episode 22, The Water Crisis in Northern Ontario Indigenous Communities with Sol Mamakwa. In Canada, there is a water crisis in many Indigenous communities. In 2025, there are 35 long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities across the country. Also, as of March 18, 2025, there were 29 short-term drinking water advisories in place in First Nations communities south of 60, excluding those in the British Columbia region. Join Keepers of the Water as we explore the water crisis in Northern Ontario Indigenous communities with Sol Mamakwa, a member of Provincial Parliament in Ontario. Sol Mamakwa is a member of the Provincial Parliament of Ontario for the Kiiwetinoong riding and is the official opposition critic for the Indigenous and treaty relations. He was elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 2018 and is the first MPP to be elected for his riding. The Kiiwetinoong riding was created prior to the Ontario election in 2017, and the population is 68% Indigenous, making it the only riding in Ontario with a majority Indigenous population.
Miigwech, Jesse, Kakanakwa Jiminawa. I say hello to everyone. Miigwech, Leo, and Priscilla, for the stories. Miigwech for the drama as well and the song. I think it started us off in a very good place as First Nations people, Indigenous people. In our language, my Woodland Cree, Oji Cree, and Snabemwin. Again, she mentioned that's my first language. I remember learning my English in the early grades. Bonjour, Wajie, hello. I know Jesse spoke about that. That I'm going to be sharing some of the barriers, the challenges, and that we face in Northern Ontario as First Nations. But not only that, she mentioned I'm a politician. And, it's not something I planned on. It just kind of happened in 2018. And then it's just, being a member of Provincial Parliament, being an MLA. I know there's different names. And there's 124 of us in Ontario. And there's 15 million people in Ontario. And then there's 124 of us that do the work and doing legislation, making laws. And sometimes Indigenous issues fall in the back burner of these issues that we face. And I experience as an MPP, and not only that, but my previous work, has shown me how governments continue to fail as far as this issue of water goes, and how it is far-reaching, and in its impacts as First Nations across not just Northern Ontario but across Canada. But I think it's also important to note that, in spite of all this, I see Indigenous people, I see First Nations managing the crisis, with such hope, with such resiliency that, and with a clear focus on uplifting themselves, ourselves. And I think this is one of the, this type of gathering. I know that, Jessie, when during her introduction, again, that's my name is Sol Mamakwa. Mamakwa somehow changed to our original name was Memegweswe, the rock people, and somehow it turned into Mamakwa, which is also butterfly. It means in our language Memegwe. I come from a flying community of Kingfisher Lake. There's only about 600 people there, 700 people. And it's all part of that Treaty Number 9. As Jesse mentioned, I was elected in June 2018. Before I got elected, I did some work in education in my home community as a director of education. And then I eventually moved on to being a health director for a tribal council. And then eventually I did some work as a health advisor at the Snabeski Nation, which represents 49 First Nations in Northern Ontario. Health has always been my focus. I don't know why, but my mom was a CHR in the community health representative. That's way before we had nurses or doctors in the community. So, and I think It was just an interesting path. Like I never chose my path. It just kind of directed me this way. But a little bit about the writing of Kiiwetinoong. There's again 68% of the writing is constituent is First Nations, Indigenous people. We have the Crees by the Hudson's Bay, and then we have the OG Crees, which is the Woodland Cree, and then also the Ojibways. So I have three languages, different language dialects that I visit. Kiiwetinoong means north in our language, and then Anishinaabe, and it's about 294 square kilometers. And I have 24 flying communities that I have to visit. Like I have to get on a plane to get to them. So we have about 33,000 people in that riding. And as an MPP, I try and speak directly about in the legislature. Like I'm in Toronto today. This is my office. Like you see, Water is Life. That's from the kids from Niskandaga. They made it for me. I have a whole bunch, and also the flag that was given to me as well. The 215 that were found. So I am able to speak at this place, the legislature in Ontario. That's where I am now. Like that, they actually just finished a session now. I was just watching it on TV, and it's a like I'm able to bring these stories, truth telling stories about what's going on in our communities. That affect uh, on reserve, off reserve residents in our communities, both Indigenous and non Indigenous. Like I speak of, because I represent non Indigenous people too, and I know some of these issues are some infrastructure issues such as housing, clean drinking water, sewage, air quality, education, healthcare, mental health, policing, homelessness, emergency management, and reconciliation. Treaties, culture, language, heritage. Ways of life, natural resources. But we have to understand these issues are interrelated. Like we know as basic, we know that something as basic as not having clean drinking water has an impact on the social determinants of health. And I see it. I see it. I live it. Our people live it. When we talk about water in the writing of Kiiwetinoong in Northern Ontario and these flying First Nations, the lack of access to clean drinking water for First Nations in my area I represent, but also across Canada and also in Ontario is a profound crisis. Sometimes sometimes it's like the other Canada. Sometimes it feels like the other Ontario. But I can say it. I say it in the house. I say it in there. It's the other Canada. It's the other Ontario because they treat us differently because of who we are, where we are. And I'm talking about jurisdiction because any on reserve funding program services is federal responsibility. And these guys over here in Ontario, the province, uses jurisdiction as a way to, as if that's not they just wash their hands, that's not their problem. Like, I mean, today in Ontario, there's 143, I think, First Nations in Ontario. And, there's 22 First Nations that are on long-term boyo advisory. Long-term means anything more than 1 year. And then there's 31 long-term boyo advisories across Canada. 14 of those are in my riding of Kiiwetinoong. It's crazy. There's a First Nation called the Yabmatugis. They've had theirs for 20 years. Muskrat Dam, 18 years. The Skandaga, 26 years. Sandy Lake, 19 years. But we have to understand too, there's also the First Nations that have short-term boil water advisories, which is less than a year, right? When I share these numbers, these are just numbers. But as an MPP, as a politician for the riding of Kiiwetinoong, I am, I'm certainly privileged to be, and an honor to represent people from the best part of Ontario. We are so rich, not only in the lands, the resources that we have in our traditional territories, in our treaty territories, but also in our way of life, of who we are. What you see here today, all of us listening together, it's about nationhood. It's about coming together. It's about the more oppressed we are, the stronger we become as nations. And I think that we cannot just deal with the program services, the funding that we see, because those programs and services perpetuate the oppression, the colonialism, the crisis in our communities. But we need to be able to talk about nationhood. We need to be able to talk about treaties. We need to be able to talk about sovereignty. But at that time, we are in a place where families, in these many places that where they cannot access safe, clean drinking water in their homes, it's a crime. Can you imagine, being a young person who has never ever known what it's like to drink water from the tap? For the writing, I represent the First Nations I represent in the North. Example is Niskandaga. This is the reality. I also imagine, imagine living with bath water that could make your little one sick, or the tap water isn't safe enough to use to make dinner for your family. In many places across Kiiwetinoong and in First Nations across Ontario and Canada, this is the reality. Water is so important. Water is so critical. Access to clean drinking water is such a basic human right? But we're treated differently. We should not be having two Ontarios. We should not be having two Canadas, where one where clean water is guaranteed, and the other where people are forced to live without. I believe access to safe drinking water has been an issue for First Nations as long as there had been running water. When I lived in my home community, I got running water in I think it was 1994, and I remember when the systems were set up. In some places, they weren't set up properly, or whatever the issues, right? Whatever the issues were. I know I used to say that these programs and services continue to be underfunded chronically, but we have to know that it is all strategic. The continued underfunding is all strategic. Like that's how, like I see it happen here in the house, where like it's not broken. These systems are not broken. They're working exactly the way they're designed to, which is to take away the rights of our people to the lands and the resources that are there. And I know that as a provincial member, I struggle with being a provincial member, because this government uses the excuse of jurisdiction not to do anything, the excuse to be complacent, not to do anything on reserve, because they're the province. They say that's federal responsibility. Sometimes I call it, that they continue to play jurisdictional ping pong on the health, on the lives of Indigenous people. And when they do that, there is unnecessary deaths, unnecessary suffering, needless deaths that happen because of that. And when they play that jurisdictional ping pong, it is exactly what it is. It is structural racism. I don't know if I should call it structural racism. It's racism, period. And all levels of government have not adequately addressed these issues, because First Nations in where I come from continue to live without access to clean drinking water year after year. We have to be able to address the inequities by making sure people who live and work in First Nations have the same access to safe, clean drinking water as everyone else, whatever province you're at, wherever in Canada that you live. But can you imagine if we had to say that the water in Toronto, the water in Calgary, the water in Vancouver, the water in Ottawa was not consistent with the provincial standards? They wouldn't allow that to happen. It's just such the systems that are there is just such a complete failure to uphold one of those basic human rights for anybody living in Ontario. Never mind Ontario, in Canada as well. Treating people who live and work on First Nations as second class people, second class citizens, is unacceptable in this day and age. It's 2021, for Christ's sake. Yeah, I just get frustrated. Yeah. So, like in Ontario, standard of water says that we should expect water with a level of risk so small that a reasonable and an informed person would feel safe drinking the water. Not in our First Nations. I can tell you that no one in Canada. I mean, I can tell you that no one in in the Skandaga First Nation feel safe drinking water from the tap. I'm going to tell you a story. I think it was last year, last fall, around end of October. Niskana got evacuated because they had no running water and there was an oily sheen within the water treatment plant. I went there, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times during that crisis, and they were evacuated 61 days. I remember going to this rally with youth. They had a youth rally. There was about maybe, I don't know, 20 of them, 25 of them. Children like 8 to about 15 years old. I saw them cry. I saw them emotional, and I couldn't. It was hard, eh? And I remember seeing them. They wanted two things. One, they wanted to go home. Two, they wanted clean drinking water. That's all they asked for. And I think one of the things that happened was that I remember sharing on social media, what was happening. I remember that, and I remember people messaging me that I'm doing a good job in sharing that, right, elevating the profile, the issue, whatnot. And there were some people that reached out to me that work for First Nation organizations and Indigenous organizations, and they told me, like. We cannot really say anything. We cannot bite the hand that feeds us, type of thing. I kind of thought, what? So anyway, are you worried about your programs, your position, your funding, and then you rather see our people, kids suffer? So that's how oppression works. That's how colonialism works. Like, I mean, today, like, I'm just having water, but I'm just so privileged to be able to do that. And I remember asking the chief that one time we went to Niskandaga, and then when they were evacuated, there were about, I think, close to 300 of them that were staying in a hotel, and I constantly checked up on them, right? And I remember asking him, how many of those people that are evacuated, those 300 people, how many do you think they're drinking from the tap water? No hesitation. He says to me, zero. Everybody is so conditioned to drink from a bottled water. And I think it's the impact that it has on the mental health, on the psyche of those communities that do not have water, access to clean drinking water. It's so important that we can do better. I'm so encouraged to be able to see the people that are here. It gives me hope as well. Be able to talk to people. I talk to lots of people. I do a lot of these things. Whether it's elementary students, whether it's high school students, college students, university students, and just my thoughts, share my feelings. It always gives me hope. When I'm here, I get to see oppression. I get to see colonialism in action. We know that there is very extensive evidence documenting the historical and the ongoing impacts of colonization, forced placement of indigenous children in residential schools in the 19th century and 20th century, removal of our ancestors, our indigenous children from their families. We call it 60 scoop, and also forced relocation of communities, of nations. And I think sometimes we tend to normalize it on the impacts that we see on a daily basis, because when the status quo can be construed as normal and acceptable in our communities, and we cannot be able to be in that place. I know as Anishinaabe people, as First Nations people, as Indigenous people, we know the effects of colonization, of racism, of oppression. They are being used as weapons, used against us to make us to where we are today, to be impoverished and remove us from our lands. But also, with that oppression, I said earlier, we become stronger as nations because I see it today that they have not succeeded. They will not succeed because we've been here for thousands of years. We will continue to be here. We will be here. That is why I continue to advocate strongly for the changes within the systems that are not working within our nations. I'm always a believer of transformative change. Systemic change is one piece of the whole puzzle of what is needed to be able to move away from the colonial, oppressive, and racist policies and programs to a self-determined, nation-based approach. Our historic treaty relations require that governments of the day step up. Here in Ontario, the government of Ontario and Canada alike must respect their words to us and honor the treaties. And so we can all benefit and prosper as we share the land. I'm always hopeful for change. I believe in change. And I think I said it a number of times with everyone that's here. I see you. I don't know where everybody's from, but I see you. We are together. We are in this together. We are here for change. So certainly, I try and do my social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I even have a TikTok account, and it's Sol Mamakwa. And then, so if you want to follow me, it's I try to share those truth-telling stories. I'm a believer of truth-telling stories because these stories can actually, change public policy within the systems that are there. Be great for listening.
Thank you for listening. That was Sol Mamakwa. If you'd like to donate to the cause or find out more, visit keepersofthewater.ca. Make sure you go to Keepers of the Water YouTube channel and Facebook page and like and subscribe for more content. And don't forget to download and subscribe to the podcast to be the first to hear new episodes. Miigwech.